Hi, I'm Jen Scholter, candidate for Palm Beach County School Board District 6. Thank you for joining me in my four-part series, The War on Our Nation, How Marxism Invaded America Through Our School System. And just a quick note about me, I'm not just a candidate. I'm a business owner, a mom of 3, including 2 with special needs. And I am an education and special needs advocate for the past 16 years. And I homeschool my youngest. So a lot of people have questions and they say, what exactly is wrong with our schools? This series is taking a deep dive look to answer that question. So if you missed part 1 or part 2, you can go to my website, votejenpbsd.com, or you can go to my Rumble or YouTube channel or my Venmo channel and take a look at those videos. But tonight we're going to take a look at part 3, the de-education of America, a closer look at the academic declines. And later this week, we're going to take a look at part 4, the bigger picture, the impacts that indoctrinations, school board actions, and sexualized materials have had on the students, not just academically, and on the nation as a whole, and what we could do to fix it. So let's take a look at part 3, the de-education of America. And first, I just want to say thank you for your interest in this and your desire to take action in what may be the greatest fight of this century. And this is a covert use of our educational system to attack the country. And I know that sounds weird, but Marxism and socialism and communism have been around for a very long time. And I went into that in part 1 and part 2. And if you're not familiar with that, please take a minute and go take a look at part 1 and part 2, and then come back. But let's just make sure everybody's on the same page. Equity and equality are not the same. Equity is using force to ensure equal outcomes regardless of merit or effort. Equality, on the other hand, which is what we all want, is where everyone is given the same materials, they have the same caliber teachers, the same quality buildings, etc. But it's up to the individual to make the most of it. So CRT isn't just about ideas. Its tentacles reach into every aspect of teaching and discipline. And I'm kind of going over this briefly because it is very critical to understand this, to understand what's happening academically. So our schools are teaching emotionalism versus fact-based learning, and they've made everything subjective, even the very definition of science. The National Education Association switched the very definition of the basis for scientific theory from experimentation using empirical evidence to scientific consensus. That's just a hint of where we're going. Scientific consensus, ideas of emotions, is the basis for social emotional learning, or SEL for short. And you're hearing a lot about that in the news right now. And it's all part of critical race theory. And it forces kids to see everything through an emotional lens. And it often shuts down the right side of the brain to logic and reason. Kids get so emotionally charged, they can't listen or express themselves or have the ability to listen to an opposing viewpoint, which is ironic because a lot of the material that you see promoting SEL says it's going to actually help with that. But when you dive into the material, they start talking about how you can use SEL to promote climate change and social justice. So again, I have a whole family of teachers. I support teachers, but there are a lot of teachers out there who are pledging. The Zen Education Project is a pledge. Over 5,000 have signed it, saying that they are going to teach what they consider the truth, even if it means jail time. And what they consider the truth is the United States is inherently, immutably, or systematically sexist, racist, anti-LGBT, bigoted, biased, privileged, or oppressed, and that racial inequality is a systematic legacy of this country's history, and they must acknowledge this and help students understand the roots of US racism. So you've got social emotional learning, you've got critical race theory, and all of that is interconnected, and the sexualization, the hypersexualization of the children through the materials, which is in part 2. All of that is combined to disintegrate our education. But it's not only that, it's also a great diversion from our horrible proficiency levels. Our school boards are purposefully pushing radical agendas designed to fuel the students. They're leaving many of them unprepared for college or career and ending up dependent on the government. They're pushing learn to test, which is a method for students that leads students unable to absorb and retain what they're learning. The emphasis on standardized testing forces them to simply pass the test. Classes are rushed in order to get through all the material in time to review. And the big problem with this is that kids truly don't learn the fundamentals or understand the answer that they're using. They understand the answer to 1 is B, but they don't know why, and they don't know why A, C, and D aren't. And knowledge is built on a foundation. You have a basic knowledge, and then each thing you learn is based off of the next. So if you don't understand any of the previous levels, it's like a house of cards. It's just going to tumble down. And they are still using Common Core. And I know there's been laws passed that say we're not going to use Common Core. Well, it just gets renamed. That's the whole thing with critical race theory, which is in part 1. They use innocuous words in the opposite meaning of attention. They just rename things, relabel things. It's the same ideology over and over and over again. And the problem with Common Core is that its main objective is to determine who controls education. Because when you teach people what to think, not how to think, they won't question what you do. And part of that is lottery versus merit system for schools. I grew up in Fairfax County and everybody knows Thomas Jefferson is the #1 school in the nation. It has been for decades. And this year, the school board decided that, and this is their words, there were too many Asians and not enough Blacks, unquote. And so they felt they needed to move to a lottery system. Well, a federal judge ruled on that and said that it was U.S. District Judge Claude Hilton. He issued an order and said that this was a detriment to Asian Americans. He said, quote, "It is clear that Asian American students are disproportionately harmed by the Fairfax County School Board's decision to overhaul TJ's admissions." And basically said the school board's being racist in an attempt to not be racist. And again, another thing is they're literally now stating that math is a white construct designed to hinder minorities. You can find several professors that have written letters on this, articles on this, teachers. Well, let me back up. The problem with this, and so they're saying that the math is a white construct. It's hindering minorities. So they're trying to limit higher level math in high school, which is a big problem. Any of you who've gone into sciences or engineering know you have to have the higher level maths in order to apply for certain majors like those. So it's affecting their chances to get to calculus. It's affecting their college applications. And teachers are also testifying about what they're having to do. But first, let me dive into what our school board is saying. And I highly suggest, if you're not in Palm Beach County, no matter if you're in Florida or in a different state, to take a look at your district website. Take a look at usually it's in the About Me section, About Us section. Look at the vision and mission statements. We happen to get White Advantage taken out of the text, but if you take a look at the rest of it, it's just as bad. So our county is literally telling students they can't do it on their own. In the vision statement, they said that the school district of Palm Beach County will take ownership for students' academic mastery, emotional intelligence, and social emotional needs by creating environments where students, families, staff, and communities will develop agency and voice. You go on and read their equity statement, and it's riddled with critical race theory. So in a nutshell, our school boards want groupthink, not critical thinking, and they're using SEL, social emotional learning, and critical race theory to eliminate thought. It's just stimulus, response, to insist on kids in obedience to indoctrination and forced conformity, which leads to disastrous consequences, like giving up freedoms when told to. So the policies and decisions that our school boards are doing are taking a deep dive in our academic performance. And I'm going to show you those numbers next. And not only that, they're using disingenuous performance scales and bloated numbers to disguise the truth. And I have a big problem with the way schools are rated. If you actually rated it on a proper scale, what they consider an A should be an F. U.S. News and World Report has scored every high school in the country, and our counties have abysmal college ready index scores and plummeting math and reading proficiency scores. So what I'm about to show you is a compilation of research that I've done. Most of it is from U.S. News and World Report. I've also taken a look at the Florida Department of Education, along with several other websites. So we're going to take a look at the top 20 high schools in the state. And as you can see, it's actually really lopsided. Miami-Dade has 20 of the top 20 high schools in the state, distantly followed by Duval with 3, Brevard and Palm Beach with 2 each, and 1 from Sarasota. 14 of the schools were classified as magnet schools, and 4 of them were also designated either STEM or charter. And one thing I want to note is that when I took a good look at dozen plus of the counties within the state of Florida, I noticed that there was a severe drop off in performance levels past the first 1-2% of the schools. And surprisingly, many of the larger districts did not outperform the smaller ones. But in the larger counties, again, there was a sharp drop off. But Miami-Dade, they're kind of sneaky, and I'm going to show you why. Because they had this top 12 out of 20, I wanted to take a look at what exactly is going on with Miami-Dade. And are they really good? And if they are, why? So I took a look at Miami, and the top 10 high schools for their district averaged only 338.8 students per school. That's right. The top 10 high schools in Miami-Dade County averaged less than 340 students per school. And so according to US News and World Report, they had over 80 high schools. That includes charter and alternative schools. It's not just straight run-of-the-mill public. And you think that's a lot, but they have close to 400,000 students. And if you look at the size of the schools, most of them are well under 2,000. Most of them are under 1,000. So if you look at it that way, it kind of makes more sense that they have that many schools. It's kind of mind-boggling though. But let's take a look at their schools. I found 56 of their schools, high schools, had an A rating for graduation. And if you look at my chart, this first column here is the graduation rates. The second column is the College Ready Index score. And for those of you who don't know what that is, US News and World Report has a College Ready Index. And what that is, it's a two-part score. The first part looks at the 12th graders for that school and looks at how many of those 12th graders attempted at least one AP or IB course. The other half of that score is how many of those 12th graders passed at least one AP or IB exam. Now, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, it's got to be A, just like the graduation, because not every student's going to go to college. However, that said, there's a lot of AP, IB courses that students can take that will help them if they're going to a tech school, like physics, for example. The next two columns have the reading proficiency scores and the math proficiency scores. And I made 4 graphs for you to just put it in perspective. The first one on the top left is the graduation rate. And I scored it 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B. You can see the chart at the bottom. So 56 of them scored 90 to 100% graduation rate. So it's an A. If you look at the next chart, that is the College Ready Index. So that says how many kids attempted an AP or IB course and possibly passed one. They scored enough. The vast majority scored enough. Then you look at the reading and math proficiencies. That just means they scored above a basic level. It's not even above average, it's just proficient. Again, the vast majority, over 41, over 46, scored an F in reading and math. So that made me decide to compare notes between Miami and Palm Beach County, since I'm in Palm Beach County and my kids are in Palm Beach County. So one thing I noticed was a big discrepancy. US News and World Report listed 59 high schools. They could be charter, alternative, or standard public schools. Palm Beach School District, on the other hand, had 43 high schools and alternative schools. Many charter schools are left off of the website. They also included 2 schools that were not listed with US News and World Report. So this chart that I'm showing you is a combination of both the US News and World Report list of schools and the one from the Palm Beach School District's website. So when you combine those two, there's 61 total. 59 plus the two that weren't listed on the county website, on the US News and World, excuse me, on the US News listing that was on the county website. And again, US News and World Report got all this information from the state DOE as well as directly from AP and IB. And on the chart on the right, I've got the district rank. I have if it's a magnet, charter, or alternative, I have the graduation rate, the CRI rate, the reading and math scores. And again, it pretty much mimics Miami, except there's a lot of schools that I can't get the information from. They're unranked. The information you can't find on US News and World Report. And it's pretty difficult to find. So that gray bar just means no information was available. So let's just kind of take a look at the A to F. And again, it mimics Miami. There were 27 high schools that had an A-rated graduation rate, which is what our school district is touting. I believe it's a 94.9% graduation rate average. But if you look at our college ready index, our reading proficiency and our math proficiency, they're all scoring an F. So I wanted to take a look at the standard high schools, what would be considered standard, a standard magnet. We have two. What I consider a magnet would be Suncoast and Dreyfus. The rest of the schools are like Wellington, Palm Beach Central, Lake Worth, Boca, Seminole Ridge. So you can tell again, I have the district rank, the graduation rate, the CRI, the reading, and the math proficiency columns. But to make it easier, I've got the graphs. And again, you see the same pattern, a very high graduation rate, A-rated graduation rate. There were 20 A graduation rates, 20 F college ready index rates. They were 2 single digit, which means less than 10% of the students attempted and or passed an IB or AP class, an exam. The reading proficiency and math proficiencies weren't much better. We had 13, 14 receive an F, which means less than 60% of the students were able to pass and receive a proficiency rating. So let's take a look at Florida versus America. And there is 1,073 high schools in Florida, according to US News and World Report. There are 17,857 throughout America. So Florida only has one high school in the top 20, which is from Miami. They have 2 in the top 50. There's only 9 in the top 100. And only about 4.5% of Florida high schools are in the top 25%. Again, I took a look at county after county after county, and there's a huge disparity between the graduation rates and the math and reading proficiency rates. So let's take a look at the United States versus the rest of the world. And in 2017, Pew Research found that we were in the middle of the pack and lagging behind our peers. We are even behind Japan and Ireland. From 1990 to 2015, progress has been near stagnant. In fact, most students are still below proficiency level. In 1990, 80% of eighth graders were basic or below. And in 2015, that number was 67%. So that means in a 15-year span, we only raised our proficiency levels by 18%. And that's a problem. And let's not only forget, that's 1990 to 2015. That's pre-COVID. So COVID's only gonna make everything worse. And the other thing is the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, tests 15-year-old students around the world, and it's administered by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. And in 2018, the US placed 11th out of 79 countries in science, and we placed near the bottom in math, ranking 30th. And too many Americans are denying the truth. 1/3 who were surveyed believed that our schools were excellent. And PISA and even the Florida Department of Education weigh heavily on race and sex. The rankings are unreliable since teachers have been forced to recommend moving failing students to the next grade level. I know a lot of teachers, they have told me privately that they're forced to, or their job is in jeopardy. When I asked, what is the big push? They said, money, follow the money. Schools can lose and districts can lose funding if they don't meet a certain number. And those same teachers have also stated that they're finding the K through 12 students all across the board are 2 to 3 grades behind. And like I said, COVID and the lockdowns have only compounded the problems. So let's head over and take a look at the Florida DOE's website. This is a PDF of a report comparing, well, this one on the screen is just math, but I've also looked at the English as well. And it's the FSA and EOC scores from 2021 to 2019. So bear in mind, this is pre-COVID, beginning of COVID scores. And I don't have time to dive into it all. It could literally take several hours, but I'll summarize for you. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the math combine. It's grades 3 through 8. And in a nutshell, if you're seeing red, that means that that county saw a nosedive, a negative in performance scores. If you see green, that means that they were able to bump up and improve. If you see, white, that means that there was no change. So for grades 3 through 8 math for the state, they saw an overall drop of 10% down to 51%. 94.7% of districts saw a decrease. Many saw double digits up to 20%. You'll see there is a tab for algebra and also for geometry. Statewide, Algebra 1 saw a 13% drop, and geometry saw an 11% drop. And I won't get into the English, but needless to say, that dropped too. So what does this tell you? Let's review for a minute. The Florida DOE's website, like I said, we looked at the different scores. We saw the drops, both English and math, some of it severe. So this means the disparity between the graduation rates versus the math and reading proficiency rates equals students are pushed through the door. They are not prepared for college or career. And to just take that bottom line a little further, when you combine the hypersexualization, the social emotional learning, the learn to test method, the critical race theory, it boils down to not just the fact that the kids aren't ready, but that they're a weak-minded generation without problem-solving skills. And this is something that I'm going to delve into next later this week in part 4. I actually went and talked to a multitude of local employers and asked them about hiring the younger generation. What I found out was staggering. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But what this all also means is that students can't get the classes that they need, which means they can't apply for the majors that they want to, which hinders their future. There's little to no cognitive training, which means limited opportunities, limited abilities, and that only compounds with age. So I could go into this much further. I have a large amount of data, but it's kind of a little much for the brain to take in. So that's kind of an overview. If you'd like more information, I'd be happy to talk with you. You can contact me via my website at votegenpvsd.com. And please join me later this week for part 4, the bigger picture, the impacts of the indoctrinations, the school board actions, the sexualized materials have had on our students in the nation as a whole, as well as what we can do about it. So thank you so much for listening. I'm Jennifer Showalter, candidate for Palm Beach County School Board District 6, and I approve this message.